Hello. Hello. All right. Hopefully my audio is working. We'll see. 8 people are here. All right. Why isn't this working? Ah, now I'm recording. Okay, here we go. Hi, everybody. Just quickly, I want to make sure everybody can hear me because my computer is still being silly. Okay, good. Awesome. Excellent. All right. All right. Okay. So it's exactly 7:35 on my computer clock. So let's get right to it. Oh no. Oh, this is in my way now. Okay. So I've got some clarifications to make, which I'd like to hopefully use to occupy most of today. Some clarifications regarding the whole bit of confusion I've been having regarding whether the attitudinal theory that the authors present, which says that emotions are felt bodily attitudes, not evaluative judgments. The confusion, of course, was the confusion for me, at any rate, was centered around how different a felt bodily attitude toward a bearer of an evaluative property is any different than some kind of embodied evaluative judgment. And I think I figured it out finally. So just by way of recap, remember that what we've been sort of spending our time on is the author's own theory. The theory that an emotion is an attitude toward an object, an attitude which is appropriate to have when the latter, the object, exemplifies a given evaluative property. So as I just mentioned, on their theory, emotions are felt bodily attitudes. They're attitudes sort of like stances, like felt bodily stances, as they've described them, that we take towards particular objects. And these objects bear evaluative properties. And this is nice because it gives us some correctness conditions for emotions, right? This is part of the epistemology of emotions, right? Our emotions are correct if and only if the object that we're having this attitude toward really bears that property. So to use the shop-worn example, my emotion of fear toward the snarling dog is correct if and only if the snarling dog really does bear the property of being dangerous, right? And this was confusing to me. as I was reading, probably because, at least in part, this was a rather dense chapter, and I'm kind of on the fence again now, but previous to this, I was a big fan of the perceptual theory, as you'll all know, right? I always kind of go on about Prince and his book, Gut Reactions, and I've used this book in the past. It's proven helpful for my own research when it comes to, just having something to say about what emotions might be when we're talking about emotions. And Prince's theory is a perceptual theory, right? It's not like the James Lang theory. I mean, it is, but it's more than that. The James Lang theory was the idea that emotions are just perceptions of changes in our bodily states. Because if you take all those changes away, if you do that little thought experiment that William James suggests, all you're left with is a judgment once you've subtracted away all of those feelings. And the judgment is not the emotion. The judgment might accompany the emotion. The emotion might even, on perceptual accounts, and we'll talk about this more later, serve as a justification of the emotion, or rather the emotion might serve as a justification for a judgment, but the judgment isn't the emotion. Prince changes it up, as I've said. Prince basically pays close attention to bodily phenomenology, like James and Lang did, but he sort of assimilates Richard Lazarus's appraisal theory into an embodied, kind of makes it into an embodied version of that theory. And on appraisal theory, emotions are judgments, right? Emotions are judgments that we make that basically, kind of tell us what the core relational theme is between ourself and the elicitor of the emotion, or what's going on, right? The core relational theme for fear is danger. And just to get back to the attitudinal theory, what Lazarus is calling a core relational theme is what Deonna and Teroni are calling an evaluative property, or a value. So yeah, Prince takes that and just makes it embodied, right? So I was having trouble. I was just like, I cannot quite make sense of the way in which this is not an embodied emotion. And I understand some of you may have shared that frustration with me. I'll just get a kind of not a show of hands, but like, if any of you were confused in the same way I am, let me know in the chat or via voice. Or if you were confused by this in a different way, also let me know. Let's talk briefly about it now before we clear it up. Robin says, I for sure was. Yeah. Emily is confused in the same way as me. So Emily, if I understand you, and Isabella, if I understand what you're saying, you kind of had the same gripe that I did. And I'm worried now that I may have accidentally made you all have the same problem by teaching you my confusion. So I want to try and clear it up, right? So, okay, so Emily, Isabella, and Robin, you were confused because, how is this not a judgment, right? How is it not a judgment? That's what was confusing. Yeah, they do sound the same. Yeah, I agree, Emily. Was anybody confused for different reasons? Could be reasons, I'm not sure what an attitude is, or something like that. Could be anything like that. Okay, so it seems to be people were confused for the same reasons that I was confused. Well, if I inadvertently confused you because of my constantly railing on about Prince's theory, let's try and clear that up now, because I posted a bunch of stuff on the Discord channel for this class after the end of our last lecture. because I was looking for these book reviews, right? I was trying to find book reviews that maybe pointed out the same sort of problem that I was having. And I didn't find anything. But what I did find was one review of the book, which clarified things in a way that, I was misunderstanding what Deonna and Teroni were saying. And I think that's because the chapter that we were dealing with is very sort of compartmentalized. And we've spent so long on it, it's easy to forget important details from one part and why they are relevant for other parts. So I'm just going to read this little bit from a review paper that I found. And I've shared the link for this, and I've shared this passage already on Discord. But I want to go over it now, just to try and clear things up. Okay, what does this review say? It says, the question of what emotions are is the most fundamental issue in the philosophy of emotion. Yeah, we've seen that so far, I would say. In answering this question, in answering this question in different ways, we get diverging theories of emotion, right? Okay, makes sense. If we say emotions are perceptual, we get perceptual theories. If we say they're judgments, we get cognitive theories, like appraisal theory or evaluative judgment theory, right? Deonna and Teroni have proposed a new theory, the attitudinal theory, which tells us what emotions are. Broadly, the view is that emotions are evaluative attitudes, such that different emotion types are distinct evaluative attitudes. Fear as an emotion type is an evaluative attitude we take toward things that are dangerous, right? Okay, so far so good. More specifically, the emotions are evaluative attitudes toward intentional contents provided by other mental states. They're cognitive bases, such as judgments, imaginations, and perceptions. Here's where I think I was getting confused. And I'm still, by the way, I'm still not sure that I actually buy what Deonna and Teroni are doing here. But at least now I can say, here's why they don't think evaluative attitudes are the same as judgments, okay? It's because of the way that, not the way, but not because of a way of anything. It's because of the content. So Robin asks, so judgments are a part of evaluative attitudes. I wouldn't say they're a constitutive part, but they can be one of the bases for evaluative attitudes. I think this will become a little clearer once I read the next part of the quote. So let's go to the next bit. So in contrast to evaluativist views, like judgmentalism and perceptualism, the relevant contents are claimed to be non-evaluative. Thick evaluative properties like the disgusting, dangerous, terrifying, humorous, and admirable, which are connected to the individuation and intelligibility of emotions, are not part of the content of the emotional experience. I've added this emphasis. Here's the difference. And this relates back to the intentionality constraint. You might notice this. Judgments are mental states. Perceptions are mental states, right? Beliefs, desires, these are all different types of mental states, right? They're not all attitudes, though. Perceptions are not attitudes, right? Beliefs, desires are propositional attitudes. But we saw earlier that there are also non-propositional attitudes, like imaginings or episodic memories, right? So there are all kinds of mental states. Some of them are attitudes, some are not. And of the attitudes, some are propositional and some non-propositional, right? And it depends what their content is. If their content is something to do with a proposition, a statement about the world that's true or false, then it's a propositional attitude. If I imagine, if I believe that the earth is flat, I am taking an attitude of belief toward the proposition the earth is flat, right? If I make a judgment, the content of that judgments are propositional attitudes, right? I can judge that P, right? I can judge that this is a good cell phone, right? I can think about it like, what does it do? Does it do all the things I need it to do? It does. Okay, it's a good phone, you know. That's a propositional attitude, the content of which is evaluative. That's what a judgment is. Even if a judgment is embodied, things get a little bit trickier here when you think of embodiment, because now we're taking an embodied stance toward the judgment, the embodied stance toward, you know, some evaluative thing that's supposed to be the content. Felt bodily attitudes do not have evaluative properties as part of their content, but as part of the bases, the cognitive bases that support or enable or help to realize the actual emotion, which is a felt bodily attitude. That's the difference. It has to do with where the content is and what it is. Judgments are about evaluative, their content is evaluative. Felt bodily attitudes, no. That's what they say. Anyway, that's supposed to be the difference. So to continue, although the relevant emotion is correct if and only if the object provided by the cognitive base exemplifies the relevant evaluative property. As such, emotional experiences as felt evaluative attitudes, and here's that intentionality constraint, stand in intentional relations to values without being about values. Their content is not the value. Remember, their content is the bearer of the evaluative property, not the evaluative property itself. And that is why they are not judgments, okay? So that now there's some stuff happening here. Emily says, could we draw a map of this or something? I'll try. Okay, maybe. It's too bad there's not a way we can do this together. I wish I had a whiteboard or something. Let's see. I still have my scrap paper here. Maybe I could map this out. Let's map out. What exactly should we map out? Should we try and map out, you know, mental states, different attitudes, blah, 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 like that kind of hierarchy of mental states that I was talking about? Okay. Okay, I will do this. Let's see. So we want to make sure. So we've got mental states, states of the mind at the top. I'll take a picture of this later and put it on Discord, but we have mental states. Lots of different kinds of mental states, right? We have perceptions. Now, perceptions are kind of interesting. They're kind of their own special kind of animal, if you like. Perceptions, there's an interesting debate on whether and if they are, how perceptions are different from cognition. Obviously, some cognition is going on when we perceive something, right? In the sense that there's some kind of computational process between whatever sense modality is being, you know, affected by the environment and the perception that I have. But it's not the same as like deliberating or believing or judging. There are differences there. So we'll put perceptions in their own little bubble. But then we have other kinds of mental states. We have attitudes. Now, attitudes could be, let's see, propositional or non-propositional. Okay, so we have, and again, I'll make a picture of this, but we have perceptions. They're kind of their own thing. And then we have some different kinds of attitudes. We have propositional attitudes, like beliefs and desires and judgments, and non-propositional attitudes, like imaginings, for example. But there's another kind of attitude that the authors introduce, and that's felt bodily attitudes. So they're also a kind of, they're not quite like a perception. They're arguing. There's more to a felt bodily attitude than there is to a perception, especially when it comes to emotions, because what the authors are arguing is that your felt bodily attitude is really a felt stance taken towards something as dangerous. And part of that is all of the stuff that's happening in your body, right? You're not just perceiving danger, like you're perceiving red circles and blue vases. You're getting ready to act on the basis of what you take to be a dangerous object, right? Now, the important thing is that when it comes to propositional attitudes like judgments, the content for a judgment is something evaluative, right? The proposition features, the proposition that serves as the content of, the attitude that you're taking toward the proposition is always evaluative when you're judging something. It's evaluative in one sense or another. Even if you're judging the lengths of lines, right? That's still kind of evaluative, right? As opposed to judging like whether a painting is beautiful or whether an action taken is right or wrong, right? That's what a judgment is. A judgment is a pro attitude. But a felt bodily attitude isn't like that, because the felt bodily attitude isn't about the evaluative property like judgments are. The felt bodily attitude is about the object that you're taking the stance toward, which is, if your attitude is correct, bears the property. So the evaluative properties, evaluative judgments don't figure in the content of your felt bodily attitude the way they would figure in a judgment. They're not the content, right? Okay, Emily, yes, good, I'm glad. So my messy map of meaning, maps of me, Jordan Peterson. This says mental states, and we have perceptions, and we have different kinds of attitudes. So we can have propositional attitudes like beliefs and desires, non-propositional attitudes, and felt bodily attitudes, which, if I understand the authors correct, might be kind of like a type of non-propositional attitude, or maybe kind of like a mix between a non-propositional attitude and a perception, if you still wanted to argue that, well, there's not really a difference here, and I think that the thing that was confusing me is that I was like, functionally speaking, what is the difference between the two, right? Okay, I still have a bit of a gripe, I guess, right? Because the authors are saying, oh, well, they're not judgments, they're evaluative attitudes, because the content isn't the evaluative property. The evaluative property is part of the cognitive bases, along with your perceptions, beliefs, and other stuff like that, right? Yeah, like according to the authors, emotions fall under felt bodily attitudes, right? That's what they're saying in this chapter. That's what the attitudinal theory says. Emotions are therefore not like perceptions. They're not propositional attitudes, because they're not judgments. There are felt bodily attitudes. And felt bodily attitudes do not have in their content evaluative properties. Those are part of the cognitive basis, right? Does this clear it up for everybody? Awesome. Awesome. Robin says yes. Hopefully others find this clearer as well. Now, I don't know. I still don't know, because as I started to say a moment ago, functionally speaking, what's the difference between a felt bodily attitude that indirectly puts you in touch with the relevant evaluative property, which is borne by the object, and an embodied judgment? Functionally speaking, they both get us the same thing, right? They both put us in touch with the danger of the snarling dog. They both make what needs to be significant, or what is significant for the person experiencing the emotion, salient. They both do the same job. And I still am not sure if I agree that the felt bodily attitude theory is better than like Prince's theory. It's totally better than the James Lang theory. Yeah, totally. But I don't know. Jury is still out. But we got some questions here. Let's address those. So Robin asks, would a judgment be more conscious than an evaluative attitude? Judgments that are, like propositional attitudes, judgments that are pro attitudes, yes, usually. But I think there's still a case to be made that there could be unconscious judgments, right? Or embodied judgments. And that's where I don't see the difference, right? I get the difference. Okay, the content is this in the case of judgments, but the content is that in the same, in the case of felt bodily attitudes. But they both seem to do the same job. They both seem to explain things equally well. So yeah, I don't know. Later on in chapter 8, the authors will talk about value intuitions, and maybe that will clear some things up. I don't know, but I will suspend my judgment. Little judgment pun. I'll suspend my judgment about this until we get further into chapter 8. And Emily says, perhaps we can feel an emotion without making a judgment. Okay, that's a good point. It sounds more like emotions happen upon us without consciously deciding. Yeah, like emotions. This is why this is part of the appeal of the perceptual theory, I think, right? Emotions happen to us like perceptions happen to us, right? Like if I look over here, I just turn my head and look down and I see my dog, right? I don't have to try and do that besides turning and looking, right? Come here, Juice. What do you want? Yeah, I don't have to like try and perceive the dog. My sensory systems do that for me, right? Oh, everyone's saying hello. Everyone's saying hello. Everyone's saying hi. Oh, you've got bad breath. You've got bad breath. So, you know, if I look at the dog, I'm going to see the dog, and my perceptual system just takes care of it. But if I look at the dog and feel like happy, like, oh, it's my pupper, I'm happy to see her, oh, you know, and I do the dog thing that dog people do, that's an emotional response. That also seems to just like happen to me, right? Or if somebody made a rude or offensive remark to you, you just get angry, right? Or you get like, you get offended, or, you know, it just happens, right? Or if someone gives you a nice gift, you just become happy, right? They happen Emotions happen to us like this. And I think maybe that's another part of the appeal of the perceptual theory, right? But like Emily says, maybe we can feel an emotion without making a judgment. Yeah. I mean, how would we know that we're making a judgment versus taking a felt, having a felt bodily attitude? Again, what's the difference? What's the difference? What's the difference between an embodied attitude and or an embodied judgment and a felt bodily attitude toward a thing that bears an evaluative property? It seems to me. Oh, that's an interesting. I'll come back to that in a second, Emily. But it seems to me like if you're going to say, oh, their emotions aren't judgments, they're attitudes, and the evaluative stuff that we need to worry about is provided in their cognitive bases. I mean, functionally, I don't see the difference. I just do not see a difference. I don't see a difference that matters. I don't know. But Emily, can you expand on what you mean? Like there are two different types of emotions. Do you mean that there are emotions that might be accompanied by judgments and some that are not?
Yeah, I'm just gonna talk because it's easier.
Sure.
I was gonna say it feels like there are emotions that can just happen upon us, like a perception. If someone insults me, I'm just gonna get mad. I don't really consciously decide that, it just kind of happens. But then there's also emotions that to me are sounding more like this felt bodily attitude where, or no, I mix that up. Yeah, I mix that up. The felt bodily attitudes are the ones that seem to be no judgment happening. It's kind of just like based upon all the things that have happened in my life. Of course, I'm going to get upset if someone, makes fun of this artist because they're my favorite. Like it's not really a judgment. It's kind of like just part of my cognitive bases. There wasn't a judgment there. It was just like happening. But then there's also other emotions that I think do involve a judgment where you actually do think like, oh my gosh, like, like someone says something to you and like later in the day you're thinking about it, you're like, that was actually so mean, like, or something.
Yeah.
Like there seems to be emotions that happen upon you based on things that are just part of your life and who you are, and those are felt bodily attitudes. But it also seems like there's emotions that are much more of a like process that we think about, and that leads to us having and like judging. We have a judgment that leads us to have that kind of emotion.
Yeah, like that's a really good point. I often go through this a lot because I'm like I'm kind of an awkward dude sometimes talking to people, and I won't pick up on certain things, and I'll start thinking about it later, like, oh, did they actually mean something else? I don't know. Whoa, like maybe I didn't pick up on the fact that their compliment was actually not a compliment, or vice versa. Tula, what's up? And then when I think about it and I have that realization, like, oh, actually they were being, they were being mean or something, right? Then I'll have the reaction, then I'll be offended then, right? Once I've thought about it. So yeah, I definitely. Yeah. I mean, judgments, and on this account, judgments would seem to, I mean, would Deonna and Teroni say that if in this scenario that we're talking about, where like later in the day you have an emotion that involves more judgment, is that judgment still just part of the cognitive base, the cognitive bases? I think they would say that it is, but I'm not sure if I agree that it is. Yeah, I think I am going to email them after the class is over, because I do have questions, and I think that they're, the authors are probably just the best people to answer the questions. So I'm going to send them an email, hey, big fan, use your textbook, but I have a couple questions, maybe you can help me out for the next time I teach the class, because because I think I would like to use this book again. I think it'll be easier after having taught with it once. But I guess some of my intuitions are not in alignment with Deonna's and Teroni's when it comes to this whole thing. But in any case, I hope that this clears up all that confusion that I may have inadvertently caused last time. So anyway, Tula, go see your Sarah. Go on, go see. Let's see. Okay, we're doing well for time. Probably not going to go that long today. Thankfully, the next chapter is quite short. So we're just going to start the next chapter. We're not going to get too far into it today, but let's carry on. Okay, so recall the constraints that the authors have been checking whether their theory, their attitudinal theory, satisfies these constraints. There are three of them, right? There's intentionality, phenomenology, and epistemology. And in this chapter, they're largely concerned with the first two. So I'll just read from 85. So remember, the first, emotions stand in intentional relations to values without being about values. That's the intentionality constraint. Second, emotions are essentially phenomenological states. You know, there's something that it's like to be, they're felt attitudes or felt stances, so they're essentially phenomenological, and stand in relation to values in virtue of being the phenomenological states that they are. They stand in relation to values by virtue of being these felt bodily stances or tendencies, action tendencies, felt action tendencies toward the objects of the emotion, right? Third, emotions are crucial, perhaps ineliminable, sources of justification for our evaluative judgments, even though they essentially depend on other cognitive states providing them with their objects. And this kind of gets, this is the epistemological constraint, and this gets to what we were talking about a moment ago. What Emily brought up about the different, you know, how there seems to be emotions that, oh yeah, that's certainly a felt bodily attitude, but other emotions where after the fact and you're thinking about what happened, and that changes your emotional experiences, or you have a different emotional experience when you think about it. So, and this kind of goes to what I was saying before. I think if I understand the epistemology constraint, I think Deonna and Teroni would say like, whoa, hang on, that judgment still isn't part of your emotion. It's part of the cognitive bases for your emotion, but it's not, because it's not the content. It's not the content. The content, if there is a content of a felt bodily attitude, would still be toward the situation that you were reacting to in the first place. It's just that now your cognitive bases for that emotion have changed because there's a different judgment there, right? See what I mean? Now, we won't worry too much about the epistemology constraint now, because the authors are going to talk about it in later chapters, particularly in the next one, where they talk about emotions and their justification, right? How is it that emotions are crucial or ineliminable sources of justification for evaluative judgments, even though evaluative judgments aren't part of what emotions are, right? That's what we're going to talk about next in the judgment stuff. But now we're going to wrap up the discussion of these constraints. So last time we were talking about the intentionality constraint, and I kind of left it off there, but just to reiterate, you know, because on this theory, emotions are not judgments, but rather attitudes. And remember, this is the key difference I was talking about before. Emotions as attitudes are not about evaluative properties. They're about the bearers of evaluative properties. And the evaluative properties are supplied by perhaps judgments that are not the emotion themselves, but part of the cognitive bases, right? But we can see how this fulfills the intentionality constraint, right? Emotions as embodied attitudes stand in relation, intentional relations to values without being about values, because the relevant evaluative properties are something that the particular objects of the emotions have, right? Or might not have, right? They might or might not have them, but it's those particular objects that are what emotions are about. But the properties are made available to us through the cognitive bases of our emotions, which could include judgments, but also perceptions, beliefs, all kinds of other mental states. All of these, except the felt attitudes, right here, which are the emotions. All the other stuff could be a cognitive basis for an emotion, or collectively part of the cognitive bases for emotion. So emotions stand in intentional relations to values without being about values, because remember, they're not about evaluative properties on this theory. They're about the bearers of evaluative properties. They're about the snarling dogs, not danger. They're about the offensive remark and not, offensiveness itself, right? Does everybody follow me? Let's see. So what do you mean, Emily? Which constraint are we talking about? Or I just if you could clarify your question there. Oh, which is which? This is the intentionality constraint that we're talking about, which says that any theory of emotions has to posit that, or has to satisfy this constraint, where emotions, whatever they are, stand in intentional relations to values. So they're somehow about values without being about values. They're not about values in the sense that evaluative properties are their content, because the contents of emotions, what emotions are about, are the bearers of the evaluative properties and not the evaluative properties themselves. And that's how, on this theory, we can say that emotions stand in important intentional relations to values without being about them, without having values, evaluative judgments or evaluative properties or values or anything like that as their content. Rather, all of that is part of the cognitive bases of emotions, just not part of the content of emotions, right? Does that make sense? All right, good. Happy that helped. It is tricky stuff. Like it's tricky. Yeah, I think if the next time I teach this class, maybe what I'll do is make the first lecture just a quick philosophy of mind, like crash course in philosophy of mind. And that might help clarify things, because the authors are very good at explaining philosophy of mind and stuff on the fly as they proceed. But for students without a background in that, I think maybe it would be helpful, if I did some of this kind of thing in the very first lecture before we really get going. So maybe I'll do that next time. We'll see. Okay, so that's the intentionality constraint. What about the phenomenological constraint? What do the authors say about this? Well, let's just go and reread it. The phenomenological constraint: emotions are essentially phenomenological states and stand in relation to values in virtue of being the phenomenological states they are, right? Further, remember, the point here is not simply that there is something it is like to undergo an emotion, but that this experiential aspect of the emotions explains how they relate to evaluative properties. Good. Yes. I'm gonna, where's my phone? You know what? I'm gonna make a better map. And keep in mind this right here, this is not exhaustive, and probably some people would also agree that would also think it's wrong. You know, what's up, dudes? Go see your Sarah. Go see your Sarah. I think my dog is Hungry. I can't say the hungry word because she knows. But I'll make a better map. Yeah. My dog, oh man, she's smart. She knows what's up. We have to make up words for, you know, FOOD. We have to like make up nonsense words because she's learned all of the English words. We can't even talk about anything related to that without her starting to, you know, ask for FOOD. So yeah, it's funny. Yeah, she's very clever. I will teach her how to spell. Tula, can you spell dog? I have to get one of those. What do they do? Those people have those TikToks where they teach their dog how to respond in words, but you know, they just have to hit the right bell sitting beside the word. Those are fun. Yeah, those are fun. I saw a really I should try and find it again. There was a really funny one I saw a while ago that I'll have to share if I can find it. But anyway, Tula, go on. Go see your Sarah. Go bother her. She's not teaching right now. I am. So yeah, this map is, you know, just take it with a grain of salt, but I'll make a better one. I'll take a picture of it and I'll upload it to the Discord server. And yeah, philosophy is funny that way, isn't it? Because philosophy is so abstract, typically, that, well, often philosophers won't do this sort of thing. Sometimes they do make tables and charts and stuff. Sometimes they do, but often they don't, which I think is a shame. I mean, you guys all know about Venn diagrams, right? With the circles and well, Venn diagrams. I'll show you. Let's see. You know, a Venn diagram is like made with circles. So let's say like this. This is a very simple example, but you know, you'll have two circles, and the circles always represent set membership. Yeah, right. Yeah, Hayden knows. So yeah, like this, like DC fans. This is the set of all the people who are DC fans, and this is the set of all the people that are Marvel fans, and here is the set of people who are both. Right? Real simple, right? This philosophers invented this. It's true. This was invented by a British philosopher. Truth tables are another good one. Wittgenstein, truth tables, very helpful for visualizing logical relationships. So sometimes philosophers do this, but not a lot because things are so abstract. But, you know, I'll take the opportunity to, I think moving forward, I'll try to visualize more stuff for you, right? I think that would be helpful. So that is what I will try to do. Anyway, sorry, that was a bit of a digression, but so the idea here is just to reread that quote. Remember, the point here is not simply that there is something it is like to undergo an emotion, but that this experiential aspect of the emotions explains how they relate to evaluative properties. And the basic idea is like this. The idea is that, you know, in a similar way to the way in which the phenomenology of visual experience just makes perceptual properties manifest, the phenomenology of emotions makes evaluative properties manifest, right? And you can, you know, think of some examples like, you know, the phenomenology of perceptual experience making perceptual properties manifest. Perceptual properties are things like, color, shape, distance, stuff like that, right? So there's something that it's like to perceive a blue vase. The phenomenology is that something that it's like, right? But the phenomenology of my experience of a blue vase is the thing that makes the perceptual properties manifest: the shape of the vase, the color of the vase, whether it's solid, whether it's got something in it, or whether it's empty, right? The experience just gives me those perceptual properties. So the phenomenology just makes manifest the perceptual properties, right? So the idea is that somehow emotions, the phenomenology of emotions, do the same thing for evaluative properties. So we need a theory of emotions that satisfies this constraint, that explains the phenomenology of emotions in such a way that it can explain how the phenomenology of an emotional experience is making evaluative properties manifest to us. That's what we need to do. Now, does the attitudinal theory do this? Well, we'll go right to the authors for this one. Big long quote here. Does it satisfy? Oh, you want to go up here too? So there you go. Come on. Go on. Come on. Up you go. So, all right. Does the attitudinal theory satisfy the phenomenology constraint? Well, from page 87. The body is felt in the form of a gestalt of bodily sensations, parts of a whole, many layers. Remember, this is a holistic account. So gestalt of bodily sensations, which consists in being ready to respond in a given way to the object, right? These are those felt bodily stances. If experiencing such an attitude is all there is to experiencing something in evaluative terms, then of course, the relation between the attitude and the fact that the evaluative property enters into the correctness conditions of the mental state is anything but contingent. For the existence of such a relation between distinct emotions and distinct evaluative properties is not elucidated merely in terms of the existence of naturally selected patterns of covariation between them, but rather in terms of the nature of the relevant attitudes themselves. And this, we believe, shows that the phenomenology constraint can be met without subscribing to a perceptual theory of emotions. There's a lot going on here. One of the things they're sort of taking us back to are those, those relations we talked about, like, fire and smoke, right? Does the presence of smoke represent fire? Well, maybe, but one problem we saw with the perceptual theories was that the presence of fear does not represent danger. The perception, or not the perception of fear, but the experience of fear, the phenomenology of fear does not by itself represent danger. Again, I'm not sure if I buy this, but let's reread this part. The existence of such a relation between distinct emotions, so what it's like to have emotions, and distinct evaluative properties, is not elucidated merely in terms of the existence of naturally selected patterns of covariation between them, but rather in terms of the nature of the relevant attitudes themselves, right? So it's not just that, fear is evolved, fear is adaptive, but it's the nature of what fear is as a felt bodily attitude, as an attitude, as a stance towards something that could be bearing the property of danger. And we know what fear is like, right? It's for, the nature of fear is for dealing with that danger. The phenomenology of fear, the blood racing, the breath increasing, the hair standing on end, is all to get you ready to fight or fly, right? And this shows, they say, that the phenomenology constraint can be met, and we don't need to subscribe to the perceptual theory. I'm not going to talk much more about the phenomenology constraint because they come back to it, I think, in subsequent chapters. So I think we're just going to begin the next chapter, finally, chapter 8. And we're going to talk about emotions and their justification. And there's not much here. We're just going to talk a little bit about why questions, right? So the authors, when it comes to epistemology, they've already discussed the conditions, excuse me, under which an emotion is correct, right? To quote from page 91, we have said that distinct emotional attitudes are correct when the object provided by their cognitive bases exemplifies the relevant evaluative property. My fear is correct just in case the object, the snarling dog, exemplifies the relevant evaluative property. My cognitive bases seem to suggest that it is dangerous. And if the dog truly is dangerous, then my fear is correct. So those are correctness conditions, but what about justification conditions? Well, we need to account for the justification conditions on this theory. What kind of justification conditions do emotions need to satisfy on the attitudinal theory that the authors are defending here? Well, how do they do this? They'll do this by exploring a difference between perceptions and emotions vis-a-vis the emotions that they explain. That's not right. I think I might have made a mistake there. And disregard. In any case, on page 92, the authors say, in a nutshell, the possibility of asking why questions about the emotions shows that they are unlike perceptions, states for which we have or lack reasons. This should become clear here on the next slide. One of the things that we talked about in the perceptual theories chapter is that perceptions, or perceptual experiences rather, provide defeasible reasons for perceptual judgments, right? Remember the example I just used, the blue vase, or the red circle is one that the authors use a lot. My experience of the blue vase or the red circle is just good enough for me to justify my judgment that, oh, that's a red circle or that's a blue square, right? All that information is just given to me in the perceptual experience, right? So that's important. And also recall that perceptual theories draw an analogy between perception and emotion. The parallel is supposed to be that just in the same way that my perceptual experience of the blue vase justifies my perceptual judgment that the vase is blue, or provides defeasible reasons for that judgment, an emotion provides defeasible reasons for an evaluative judgment. I'm angry. Why am I angry? Well, because this guy's offensive, right? That was the idea. Now, is this correct? This is what thinking about why questions shows us. If you think about why questions, what are why questions? Why questions are questions we can ask about, okay, why are we having this judgment? Why are we making this judgment, right? Why questions. Answers to why questions concerning perceptual judgments reach rock bottom when reference is made to a perceptual experience that there is no reason to distrust, right? Say you're looking at a tree and you're having a visual experience of a tree. There's a tree on my, what do you call that? Tapestry? I don't know. There's a tree there. So say I'm looking at it. And you're like, why do you judge that that's a picture of a tree? And I'd answer, well, I mean, look, it's a tree. Just look at it. You can see the tree. It's just given to me there, right? So those why questions, why do you judge that there's a tree in that picture? Or if you're outside looking at trees or cars, why do you judge that there's a tree there and a car there? Well, you just see it. Right? So the why questions for perceptions reach rock bottom right away because defeasible reasons for our perceptual judgments are just given to us in our perceptual experiences, right? Does everybody follow so far? Just make sure, get some yeses in the chat before we continue. Okay, good. Good. How are we doing for time? I'm doing good. Yes, we'll probably wrap up a bit early, but that's fine. Now, the same is not true of emotions. as you may have guessed. This doesn't seem to work for emotions. Why? Well, the authors say, not only do emotions provide odd answers to the relevant why questions, but even when we accept them as such, they clearly do not end the quest for justification in relation to evaluative judgments. Thus, even if I am angry about it can provide an answer to the question, why do you think the remark is offensive? We are likely to go on and ask, but why are you angry about it? And expect the answer to provide more than a mere causal explanation. And this is what the authors mean when they say that emotions are states for which we either have or lack reasons. This is not true of perception, which is more of a causal thing, right? If I look at the blue vase, there's light hitting that vase, and blue light is reflected off of the vase and hits my eyes, goes through my optic nerves, the occipital cortex. A bunch of crazy neuroscience happens, and I have the visual experience of a blue vase. It's all very causal. This is why it seems like perceptions just happen to us, right? Emotions aren't like that, though. I can't reasonably ask, why do you see that? Why do you judge that there's a blue vase? Well, like, what are you talking about? I'm looking at it. The why questions stop there, because everything that we need to justify that perceptual judgment is given to us in the experience. But this is not true for emotions. If I experience an emotion, I can keep asking why questions about it, right? Like, why do you think that joke was offensive? I'm angry. That provides a reason. But you can still ask more. Well, why are you angry about it? Well, it was because the joke made fun of somebody I care about, maybe, Oh, but why is that bad? Oh, well, because I don't want harm to come to people I care about, perhaps, or something like that, right? The why questions do not bottom out because emotions are states for which we lack or have reasons, right? Perceptions are not like this. Perceptions are more causal, and perceptions do not have conditions of justification. The fact that we can ask these why questions of emotions kind of implies that they can be justified or unjustified, right? You see how that works? Oh, and further, another important thing is that, where perceptions serve as like primary modes of access to perceptual properties, shapes, colors, and stuff, emotions don't seem to do the same thing for evaluative properties. They're not primary modes of access to properties, especially when you consider that all the, everything evaluative, all those intentional relations to values without being about values, all of that is in the cognitive bases of our emotions, right? Not the emotion itself. So that's why emotions cannot provide direct access to evaluative properties in the same way that perceptions provide direct access to perceptual properties, right? So does everybody understand so far? Okay, good. This chapter, I have to say, is a lot easier to get through than the previous one. So next time I'm going to try and get through most of it, if not all of it. And I also have a surprise. Let's just move this out of the way. Stay tuned for yet another possible extension, because I want to get all your grading done before I have you hand in your third critical response. So it's still on See You Learn. It says it's due on the 28th, but I'm probably going to bump that back by a week. This way I can get your essay proposal feedback to you and the feedback for your second critical response. And, after this, we've got like, 3 more weeks after this week. So, yeah, why not? Why not? I'm the extension guy. So, and you've all heard this before, but this allows me to, make the feedback better, because the feedback, especially on your essay proposals, is really supposed to be about making it so that you can write the best essay that you can. So if I just spend like 5 minutes and, good, bad, okay, like that doesn't help anybody. I want to put detailed comments, give you recommendations for sources, and I got like 40 of these things to do. So, probably there's going to be an extension. So just keep an eye out for that. Otherwise, if there aren't any more questions, then that's it really. I think I'll leave it there, and we will try and get through most of chapter 8 next time. So yeah. All right. Likewise, Isabella. Everyone have a good night. Take care. Email me with any questions or concerns. Bye for now.